I remember the exact hum of the fluorescent lights in the principal's office, a low, angry buzz that seemed to vibrate in my bones. It's a sound that will forever be tied to the moment my world finally fractured, only to be pieced back together in a way I never could have imagined. Across the large, imposing desk sat the three of them. Sarah Jenkins, the undisputed queen of Evergreen High, and her two ever-present loyal-to-a-fault friends. Their usual air of untouchable arrogance, the one they wore like a designer jacket in the school hallways, was gone. It had evaporated under the sterile lighting, leaving behind the pale, sweaty sheen of fear. Sarah, who always had a sharp, cruel retort ready, was now utterly silent, her manicured fingers obsessively picking at a single loose thread on the knee of her designer jeans as if it held the secrets to her escape. Her friends couldn't even manage that much. Their gazes were glued to the scuffed linoleum floor, as if willing it to swallow them whole. They never thought their campaign of torment would lead them here. They thought their whispers were deniable, their shoves accidental, their cruelty a private joke. They never imagined it would summon a federal agent, a woman in a severe dark suit whose gaze was so sharp and unyielding it felt like it could peel back your skin and see every lie you'd ever told. Her name was Special Agent Maria Reyes, and she was about to detonate a truth that would not only shatter their lives but rewrite the entire history of my own. She leaned forward, the fabric of her suit making no sound, her hands clasped on the table. Her voice was quiet, calm, and utterly devoid of emotion, which made it the most terrifying sound I had ever heard. "Let's talk about Aisha Thompson," she said. With those 5 words, the ground crumbled beneath their feet. How does casual high school cruelty escalate to a point where the FBI is dismantling a conspiracy in the principal's office? To understand that, to truly grasp the chilling darkness that was hiding in the bright, polished halls of my school, we have to go back. We have to go back to the day the fortress I called my life began to show its first cracks. Before I continue, make sure to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, comment below, and leave your like. Helps a lot. Section 1. The Quiet Before the Storm. My name is Aisha Thompson, and for the first 14 years of my life, I believed I was the luckiest girl in the world. My life as I know it began not with my first breath, but with the warm, firm clasp of Linda and Greg Thompson's hands in mine. I have vague, blurry memories of what came before, the scent of industrial cleaner, the murmur of too many voices in a big room, like the faded fragments of a dream you can't quite hold on to. But my real life began in that drab, sterile room at the County Services Building, a room that was instantly illuminated by the sheer force of their smiles. They were a kind white couple from a quiet, tree-lined street in a suburb of Seattle, and their house smelled perpetually of my mom's baking bread and the comforting notes of the classical music my dad loved. They had spent years navigating the heartbreaking labyrinth of infertility, and at the end of that long, painful road, they found me. Or, as they always put it, they chose me. That word was the foundation of my world. "We didn't just get you, Aisha," my mom Linda would say, her fingers gently tucking an unruly curl behind my ear as I sat between her knees. "We looked for you. I chose you. You were the missing piece we were waiting for." And I believed her with every fiber of my being. Their love was my reality. My dad, Greg, was the one who taught me to ride a bike on our sun-dappled street, his big, steady hand on the back of my seat, his voice a constant, reassuring presence until that magical moment I wobbled away on my own, my laughter echoing back at him. They filled my life with piano lessons, with endless stacks of art supplies that I would turn into colorful messes, and with unforgettable family vacations to places I had only ever seen in books: the ocean, the mountains, the desert. In the warm, safe cocoon of our little house, I wasn't a category or a label. I wasn't the black adopted girl. I was just Aisha, their daughter, loved unconditionally, without question or reservation. It was my fortress, a bastion of love and acceptance I thought was impenetrable. But fortresses are only as strong as the world outside allows them to be. The moment I stepped through the grand, intimidating doors of Evergreen High School at 14, the stones of my fortress began to crumble, one whisper at a time. Evergreen was a world unto itself. It was one of those sprawling, immaculate campuses with perfectly manicured lawns and hallways so polished you could see your reflection in them. It was a cathedral built for the city's wealthiest families, a dynasty of old money, legacy admissions, and powerful connections. It was a world of suffocating sameness, a perfect, pristine photograph that I, with my dark skin and my loving white parents, seemed to disrupt just by existing. I felt the atmospheric pressure change on that very first day. The cheerful chaos of the hallways would subtly shift as I walked past. A hush would fall, followed by a flurry of whispers that skittered around me like a shadow I couldn't shake. I couldn't make out the exact words at first, but I could feel their texture. Sharp, pointed, and coated in malice. Adopted was the first one I caught clearly, hissed like an accusation from a few lockers down. Freak was the next, a little louder this time. It was as if I was a puzzle piece from a completely different box, one that they were determined to prove would never, ever fit. This venomous little club was led by Sarah Jenkins. She was the living embodiment of everything Evergreen High stood for. Stunningly pretty, effortlessly wealthy, and armed with a special brand of cruel confidence that only comes from a lifetime of never being told no. Her blonde ponytail was always impossibly sleek, her designer clothes always looked brand new, and her smile was a weapon, bright and dazzling but completely devoid of warmth. Initially, her torment was insidious, a masterclass in plausible deniability. She'd accidentally knock my heavy textbooks out of my hands in a crowded hallway, sending them scattering across the floor. Then she'd offer a sickly sweet apology, her voice dripping with fake concern, while her friends snickered behind their hands. "Oops, so clumsy of me," she'd say, but her cold blue eyes were filled with a triumphant nastiness that made my stomach coil into a tight, painful knot. One afternoon in the cacophonous cafeteria, I was desperately trying to navigate the social minefield to find an empty corner to disappear into with my tray. That's when Sarah stuck her foot out. It was a quick, deliberate motion I didn't see coming. I went down hard. My lunch, a sad, limp slice of pizza and a handful of apple slices, flew from my tray and skidded across the dirty floor. The entire cafeteria, which had been a dull roar moments before, erupted into a unified, deafening wave of laughter. It was a physical force, a sound so loud and overwhelming it felt like it was pinning me to the ground, pressing the air from my lungs. Hot, stinging shame crept up my neck, burning my face. Through the blur of my own humiliation, I saw Sarah lean over me, her face a perfect mask of feigned concern. "Oh my gosh, you are so clumsy," she said, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "I guess your real mom never taught you how to walk properly." The words were like a physical blow, aimed with surgical precision at the most vulnerable part of my heart. In that moment of absolute mortification, I looked up and my eyes met a teacher's. It was Mr. Henderson, my history teacher. He saw me. He saw me on the floor, my lunch splattered around me, surrounded by a sea of laughing, pointing students. I saw a flicker of something in his eyes, pity, annoyance. And then he just turned away. He turned and walked back to the faculty lounge. In that single, soul-crushing moment, I understood with chilling clarity. I was utterly and completely alone. The isolation became a tangible thing after that. It was a thick, suffocating fog that followed me everywhere, clinging to my clothes and my hair. My chest felt perpetually tight, as if a band of relentless anxiety was squeezing my lungs with every step I took down those shiny, hostile hallways. Fear became my constant companion, the fear of what was waiting around the next corner, the next vicious taunt, the next calculated humiliation. But underneath that was a deeper, darker fear, a seed of doubt that their poison had planted in my mind. It was the terrifying possibility that maybe, just maybe, they were right. That I wasn't just Aisha. That I was, and always would be, the black adopted girl. A charity case, an outsider who was simply pretending to belong in a world where she never could. Section 2. The escalation. It all spiraled into a waking nightmare during my junior year, at an event that was, with cruel irony, supposed to be about celebrating family. It was the annual Evergreen High homecoming fundraiser, a massive outdoor gathering held under bright lights on the football field. I begged my parents not to come. The very thought of their kind, open faces being subjected to the same sneering looks and venomous whispers that I endured every single day was more than I could bear. "Please, Mom, Dad, let's just skip it this year," I pleaded the week before, trying to sound casual. "I have a huge history paper to work on. I should really stay home." But they wouldn't hear of it. They were proud of me, proud to be my parents, and they wanted to be there. "Nonsense, sweetie," Dad said, wrapping his strong arm around my shoulders. "We wouldn't miss it for the world. We can't wait to show up and support our girl." His words were meant to be a comfort, a shield. But to me they felt like a death sentence. They arrived that evening beaming with pride, Mom looking lovely in a new blue dress and Dad looking handsome and proud in his favorite tweed blazer. For a fleeting moment, as I walked between them, their hands holding mine, I felt that old familiar sense of safety, that fortress wall rebuilding around me. But it was an illusion. The whispers began almost immediately. I saw the looks, the quick, dismissive up and down glances from the other parents, their eyes darting from my parents' white faces to my black one. I saw the flicker of confusion, quickly masked with polite indifference or a flash of pity, before they turned away to murmur to their friends. The main event of the evening was a massive group photo on the stadium bleachers. As we found a spot and settled in, I felt a familiar cold dread wash over me. I could feel their presence behind me before I even heard them. It was Sarah and her friends, circling like sharks that had scented blood in the water. "Just look at her," Sarah whispered, her voice pitched just loud enough for everyone in the surrounding rows to hear clearly. She wasn't talking to me. She was performing for the other parents. Playing one big happy family. "It's so cute how she pretends she's one of us, isn't it?" My blood ran cold. I felt my mom's hand squeeze mine, her knuckles white. Her smile faltered. "I bet her real family just threw her away because she's broken or something," one of Sarah's friends added, followed by a sharp, cruel giggle. A ripple of quiet laughter spread around us. It wasn't just the girls. A few other parents, people I recognized as friends of Sarah's family, were chuckling along, their faces tilted together in shared amusement. My own face burned with a shame so intense it felt like it could peel my skin off. Tears stung the corners of my eyes, hot and furious. I refused to let them fall. I just stared straight ahead, focusing on a crack in the wooden bleacher in front of me, praying that the ground would just open up and swallow me whole. My dad squeezed my shoulder, his voice a low, angry rumble right next to my ear. "Ignore them, Aisha. Just ignore them. They're not worth our energy." But I couldn't. Their words, especially broken and "threw her away," struck a raw, terrified nerve deep inside me. A year earlier, on a quiet Saturday afternoon, I'd been looking for an old photo album in the hall closet and found a small, locked metal box tucked away on the top shelf. My parents were out for the day. Driven by a curiosity I couldn't explain, I found the key in the back of my dad's desk drawer. My hands were shaking as I opened it. Inside, nestled among some old letters, were my adoption papers. I sank to the floor and read the cold, unforgiving legal jargon. Relinquishment of parental rights. Child abandoned at birth. Biological mother, Jane Doe. It confirmed the sanitized story my parents had always told me, but seeing it there, in stark official black and white, made it feel terrifyingly real. I had been left, unwanted from my first breath. That night, long after we got home from the homecoming disaster, the sound of that laughter on the bleachers echoed in my ears. Sarah's words played on a relentless loop in my head. Broken. Threw her away. An ugly, unfamiliar feeling washed over me. It was guilt. Guilt for dragging my wonderful, loving parents into my toxic world. Guilt for not being strong enough to withstand it. But underneath the guilt was a flicker of something else, something I was ashamed to admit even to myself. Resentment. I pulled the papers out from their hiding place and stared at the name of my biological mother. Jane Doe. A ghost. Nobody. Was Sarah right? Was there something so fundamentally wrong with me that my own mother couldn't bear to keep me? For the very first time, the fortress of my parents' love felt less like a shield and more like a beautifully decorated cage, designed to protect me from a truth I was too fragile to handle. Were they protecting me, or were they hiding me? Was I truly chosen, or was I just their consolation prize for the baby they could never have? The weeks that followed were a descent into a living nightmare. The bullies, emboldened by the lack of consequences, abandoned all pretense of subtlety. I opened my history textbook one morning to find "orphan trash" scrawled in thick black marker across the first chapter. My face was crudely photoshopped onto racist and demeaning memes that were passed around on a private Snapchat story I wasn't part of, but would hear students laughing about as I passed. I stopped eating in the cafeteria altogether, spending my lunch period huddled in a cold, sterile bathroom stall, my heart pounding like a drum at the sound of every footstep outside the door. Then, one gray afternoon, the psychological torment turned physical. I was walking out of the gym, heading towards the less-used side exit, when Sarah and two of her friends cornered me by a deserted row of dented gray lockers. The hallway was empty. "Where do you think you're going?" Sarah sneered, blocking my path. "Leave me alone, Sarah," I whispered, my voice barely audible. She let out a short, sharp laugh. "Why don't you just leave? For good. No one wants you here." He shoved me hard. My back slammed against the cold metal of the lockers with a loud clang that echoed in the empty hall, knocking the wind out of me. As I gasped for breath, one of her friends grabbed my backpack and viciously dumped its contents onto the floor. My books, pens, and papers scattered everywhere. As I bent down, scrambling to get my things, the other girl kicked my leg. A sharp, blinding pain shot up my shin. "Go back to the ghetto where you came from," she spat, her face twisted with hate. They walked away then, their laughter bouncing off the walls, leaving me bruised, shaking, and utterly broken on the floor. That night, I couldn't hide the massive, dark purple bruise blooming on my shin. When Dad saw it as I came downstairs for dinner, his face, which was usually so full of warmth, went rigid and hard. "Aisha, what is that?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. That was all it took. The dam I had built inside me finally broke. I collapsed into his arms and told them everything. The whispers, the cafeteria, the homecoming, the notes, the memes, the shove, the kick. All of it came pouring out in a torrent of gasps and sobs that I couldn't control. The very next morning, we were sitting in Principal Thompson's office. He listened to my dad's furious, clipped retelling of the events with a weary, practiced sigh. When my dad finished, the principal steepled his fingers and looked at me with an expression of profound condescension. "Aisha," he said, his tone dripping with a patronizing calm that made my blood boil. "I understand that high school can be a difficult, emotional time. But Sarah Jenkins and her friends, they are good kids from good families. Are you absolutely sure you're not overreacting? Perhaps misinterpreting some harmless teenage teasing? Overreacting." The word hung in the air, a stunning, absolute denial of my reality. A surge of pure, hot rage, unlike anything I had ever felt, washed through me. He wasn't just dismissing me. He was siding with them. He was calling me a liar. My parents argued, their voices rising with disbelief and anger, but he was a brick wall of bureaucratic indifference. "There's no definitive proof," he kept repeating, his new mantra. "It's your daughter's word against theirs." My hands are tied. We left his office, utterly defeated. The last vestiges of my hope shriveled and died. My grades, once a source of pride, began to slip. I couldn't focus in class, constantly scanning the room, my body coiled in a permanent state of high alert. Then, the anonymous emails started arriving in my parents' inboxes. "Your charity case is a disruptive influence on our children. Send her back where she came from." My mom would read them at the kitchen counter and just quietly cry. My dad would pace the living room for hours, his fists clenched at his sides, looking like a thundercloud about to burst. He was a man who could fix anything, a leaky faucet, a broken shelf, a struggling business deal. But he couldn't fix this, and I could see that the helplessness was eating him alive. They filed a formal complaint with the school board, detailing every incident, but it disappeared into a bureaucratic black hole. Nothing happened. My fear began to curdle into something else. Desperation. I felt hunted. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, I was walking home when a dark, expensive SUV, one I recognized as belonging to Sarah's mom, slowed down beside me. Crept along the curb, perfectly matching my pace. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought it would break. I told myself I was being paranoid, but it stayed right there with me, a silent, menacing presence. I broke into a run, my sneakers slipping on the slick, wet leaves, not daring to look back. I ran all the way home, not stopping until I burst through the front door, gasping for air, shaking uncontrollably. That night, Dad held me on the couch as I sobbed, my body trembling with a terror that felt bone deep. His arms were a steel band around me. "This ends now," he said. His voice quiet but absolutely firm, with an edge of cold fury I had never heard before. "We're fighting this, Aisha. Together. Whatever it takes." If you're still here with me, don't forget to subscribe, activate notifications, leave your like, and share this video with someone. Section 3. The Alliance and the Crack in the Wall. The turning point wasn't a grand explosion or a dramatic confrontation. It was quiet. It was a new student named Jamal. He transferred to Evergreen midway through the year, a silent observer who seemed to exist outside the school's brutal social hierarchy. He was perpetually carrying a worn-out sketchbook, and he had kind, intelligent eyes that seemed to notice everything. For the first few weeks he just watched. And he saw me. He saw Sarah's friends accidentally trip me in the hallway. He was sitting a few tables away in the library when he heard them whispering my name, followed by cruel laughter. He saw me slip into the same bathroom stall every day at lunch. Then one day, during my lunch hour exile in the nearly empty library, he sat down at my table. He didn't say anything at first. He just opened his sketchbook and began to draw. The silence between us wasn't awkward or tense. For the first time in a long time, it felt comfortable, safe. After a few minutes, he finally looked up from his page. "That's not right," he said, his voice low and certain. "What they're doing to you." I flinched, my defenses immediately shooting up like a castle drawbridge. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, my voice cold. He didn't argue. He just pushed his open sketchbook across the table toward me. My breath caught in my throat. He'd sketched a startlingly accurate drawing of the incident by the lockers. You couldn't see the girl's face, her back was to the viewer, but I knew it was me. He had perfectly captured the slumped posture of defeat, the way Sarah and her friends loomed over me. "I've seen this before," he said quietly, his eyes full of a sad understanding. "My last school, they had a problem, a big one. A lot of kids were getting hurt. The administration buried it, swept it all under the rug to protect their reputation and the rich families who were big donors. This place. It feels the same." For the first time in months, I felt a tiny, fragile crack appear in the thick wall of my isolation. But paranoia was a hard habit to break. Was this some elaborate new trick? A new way for Sarah to humiliate me? "Why do you care?" I asked, my voice still laced with suspicion. He just shrugged, a small, sad smile touching his lips. "Because I know what it feels like to be on the outside. And because it's wrong. It's just wrong." Slowly, painstakingly, I started to trust him. We began meeting in secret, tucked away in the non-fiction stacks of the library, gathering what Jamal called undeniable proof. I showed him the blurry photos I'd taken on my phone of the graffiti on my locker before the janitors cleaned it off. I played him the garbled, useless audio recordings I'd tried to get by leaving my phone on in my pocket. They were mostly just noise, but to me they were proof I wasn't crazy. We became a two-person intelligence agency. Jamal, with his artist's eye for detail, documented times, locations, and witnesses with meticulous precision in his notebook. Bolstered by his support, I got braver, managing to secretly record a few of their taunts with surprising clarity. Sarah's group noticed my new alliance. They saw me talking to Jamal in the library. They saw him as a defector from their world, a traitor to his class. The inevitable confrontation happened in the worst possible place, the middle of the crowded, roaring cafeteria. Sarah and her crew moved to intercept us, blocking our path to the exit. "Well, well," she said, her venomous eyes locked on Jamal, completely ignoring me. "I didn't realize you were into charity cases now." Jamal didn't flinch. He just stared back at her, his expression unreadable. "Or maybe," she continued, her voice dripping with poison, her smile turning into a sneer, "you're just a traitor. We don't like traitors here at Evergreen." "Leave him alone, Sarah," I said. My voice shook, but for the first time it was firm. She finally turned her attention to me, a smirk playing on her lips. "Oh look, the little orphan finally found her voice." She took a menacing step toward Jamal. "You need to learn who your friends are and who they aren't." And in that instant something inside me just snapped. All the pain, all the shame, all the humiliation and rage I had been swallowing for months, for years, came roaring to the surface. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I just reacted. I shoved her hard. "Leave us alone." I screamed, the words tearing from my throat. The cafeteria erupted into chaos. Sarah, shocked that her target had fought back, lunged at me, her nails out. Her friends jumped in. Students were shouting, teachers were blowing whistles. Strong hands grabbed me, pulling me away, and I was dragged yet again to the principal's office. This time there was no discussion. Sarah was already there, putting on a masterful performance, tears streaming down her face as she told Principal Thompson that I had viciously and randomly attacked her for no reason. Her friends all corroborated her story, their faces masks of sincere horror. The narrative was set. I was the aggressor, the violent one. Problem: Sarah was given a 1-week in-school suspension for her part in the conflict. I was facing immediate expulsion. That night my dad made a call. In his desperation, he'd been talking to a lawyer who specialized in educational neglect. That lawyer had heard rumors, whispers in the legal community about our story. It turned out, a national civil rights organization had been quietly collecting tips about patterns of discrimination in Seattle area schools. One of those anonymous tips was about Evergreen High. Our story, our documented, stone-walled, frustrating story, was exactly the kind of case they looked for. The lawyer passed our information on, and in a completely unexpected twist, the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division reached out. They, in turn, passed our information to the local FBI field office, which, by some stroke of fate, happened to have a quiet, preliminary investigation open into racial disparities in school discipline across the district. Our case was the flashpoint they needed. A week later, Special Agent Maria Reyes was sitting in our living room. She was the calm in the center of our storm. She was patient, methodical, and she just listened. She let me talk for 2 solid hours, never once interrupting. She looked at every piece of our pathetic evidence, the photos, the recordings, Jamal's meticulous notes. When I was finally done, she looked up from the folder, her expression grim and serious. "This isn't just bullying, Aisha," she said, her voice steady and reassuring. "This is a coordinated pattern of harassment. And the school's deliberate refusal to act is a potential violation of your civil rights." She explained that her office was looking into systemic issues, not just individual spats. She told us about other DOJ investigations in other states, where they'd found clear, statistical evidence of black students being suspended and expelled at dramatically higher rates than white students for the exact same minor infractions, like talking back or being disruptive in class. "I suspect," Agent Reyes said, her eyes narrowing with focus, "that Evergreen High isn't just ignoring this. I think they might be actively covering it up to protect their pristine image and their wealthy, powerful donors." My stomach dropped. This was so much bigger than Sarah Jenkins. This was the entire system. The investigation started for real then. Agent Reyes was a quiet hurricane. Students who had been too scared to speak before, once they knew they were talking to the FBI, started talking. During her official interview with Sarah, Agent Reyes calmly laid out her facts. "I have 3 signed and sworn affidavits from students who witnessed you instigating these incidents," she stated. "Witnesses who have testified that they heard you use racial slurs on multiple occasions. Would you like to revise your statement that you were the innocent victim? For the first time, Sarah Jenkins looked genuinely terrified. Then, armed with a federal subpoena, Agent Reyes gained access to the school's internal servers. And she found it. The email chain. Principal Thompson, 2 teachers, and a prominent school board member, all discussing my family's complaints, all coordinating their stories and official responses to mitigate potential liability and manage the optics. They were actively conspiring to silence me, to build a paper trail that painted me as the problem. The suffocating fear I had lived with for so long was slowly being replaced by a cold, hard knot of suspense. Agent Reyes had them. The only question was, what was she going to do with them? Section 4. The Unraveling. The emergency school board hearing was held in the auditorium to accommodate the crowd of press and concerned parents. It was packed to the rafters, the air thick with tension and whispered speculation. I was the first to testify. Walking from my seat to the podium at the center of the stage felt like wading through cement, my legs trembling so badly I was afraid they would give out. I stood there, looking out at the sea of faces, and I began to speak. I didn't just list the incidents. I told them how it felt. I talked about the burning shame, about eating my lunch on the floor of a cold bathroom stall, about the long nights I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if I really was broken, if my own mother had thrown me away because I was unlovable. When I finished, tears were streaming down my face, but my voice was strong and clear. I looked directly at Sarah's parents, who were sitting in the front row. Your daughter and this school, they didn't just bully me, I said, my voice ringing with a newfound strength. They tried to erase me. The room was dead silent. Then Agent Reyes took the stand. She was the picture of professional calm. With cold, methodical precision, she laid out the entire case. The harassment, the school's inaction, the statistical data showing a clear pattern of racial bias. Then she started dropping the bombs. She played an undercover audio recording, obtained from a student who had bravely come forward after the investigation started. On the recording, a teacher could be heard talking to another faculty member. Just give the Jenkins girl a warning, the teacher said. Her father's on the board, we can't afford that headache. The other one. Write her up. We need a paper trail on her. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Next, she projected the emails onto a giant screen for everyone to see. The conspiracy, in their own words, in black and white. There was Principal Thompson's damning sentence. We need to handle the Aisha Thompson situation internally and with discretion. The last thing we need is the DOJ sniffing around our disciplinary practices. The board members on stage squirmed in their seats. Sarah's father, a powerful real estate developer named Robert Jenkins, who sat on the board, went as white as a ghost. But the real bomb, the one that would shatter everything, dropped a few nights later, not in a crowded auditorium, but in the quiet of my own living room. Agent Reyes came to our house. There was a gravity about her that evening, a seriousness that put me on high alert. There's something else, she said, sitting across from us on the sofa. Something I found while running the comprehensive background checks on everyone involved. It's about your adoption, Aisha. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. Beside me, Linda and Greg exchanged a look I had never seen before, a look of profound fear and deep, deep sadness. Aisha, Agent Reyes said, her voice softening with gentleness. You weren't abandoned. My entire world tilted on its axis. Your biological mother didn't leave you at a hospital. She knew exactly where you were going. She slid a thick manila folder across the coffee table. I opened it with trembling fingers. The first document was a sworn affidavit. My biological mother was a white woman named Elizabeth, a daughter of one of Seattle's oldest, wealthiest, and most powerful families. As a young woman, she'd had a secret, passionate affair with a black college student. Her family, terrified of the scandal and the damage to their pristine public image, arranged everything in absolute secrecy. She gave birth in a private clinic, and the baby, me, was quietly given to a distant relative who was paid a substantial sum of money to facilitate a closed adoption and keep silent forever. I looked up from the paper, my eyes finding Linda and Greg, My parents. Their faces were etched with a pain so deep it was agonizing to witness. Mom. Linda. I whispered, my voice breaking. She's my biological grandmother's first cousin. You're your aunt. My dad finally broke the silence, his voice thick with unshed tears. We're your great-aunt and uncle, Aisha. When we got the call all those years ago, we were told in no uncertain terms that if we didn't take you, you would be lost in the foster care system forever. The terms were absolute. We were to adopt you, sever all legal ties to the family, and never ever speak of it to anyone, especially you. We loved you from the very first moment we saw you. You were our daughter. That was the only truth that mattered to us. We were so afraid that if the full truth ever came out, they might find a way to take you from us. My head was spinning, a maelstrom of betrayal, confusion, and shock. But underneath it all, an incredible, unexpected wave of joy was rising. I wasn't abandoned. I wasn't thrown away. And the two people who had raised me with such unwavering love, they were my family, my blood. But Agent Reyes wasn't finished. She pointed to the last document in the folder. It was a family tree, linking Elizabeth's powerful family to another prominent Seattle family. The Jenkins family. Robert Jenkins, Agent Reyes said, her voice grim, is your biological mother's brother-in-law. That makes Sarah your first cousin. The room spun. What? I breathed, the word a tiny puff of air. Robert Jenkins knew about you from the beginning, she said, her voice like steel. He was one of the very few people in on the secret. When you enrolled at Evergreen High under your real name, he panicked. He was terrified that the family's most shameful secret would be exposed, that it would ruin their reputation, his social standing, his business. So he orchestrated the entire campaign against you. It was never just about me being black. It was never just about me being adopted. It was about who I was. The bullying wasn't random teenage cruelty. It was a weapon, a calculated strategy designed to make my life so miserable that my parents would have no choice but to pull me from the school, making the threat I represented disappear. The school's cover-up wasn't just about protecting their image from a bullying scandal. It was about Robert Jenkins leveraging his power on the board to get rid of the secret child who threatened to upend his entire world. The final confrontation was swift and brutal. Armed with this undeniable truth, Agent Reyes arranged a meeting. She laid it all out for him. The coordinated harassment, the school board cover-up, and the motive. The real motive. Robert Jenkins just crumbled. Faced with a federal investigation for conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and a host of other potential charges, he confessed to everything. He admitted he told Sarah to make my life hell, that I was a threat to their family that had to be neutralized. Later, in a formal meeting with her mother and a team of lawyers present, Sarah broke down completely. He told me you were trouble, she sobbed, looking at me for the first time with something other than pure, unadulterated hate in her eyes. He said you were trying to ruin our family, that you were after our money. I was scared of him. I always have been. Watching them unravel, watching their world of power and lies disintegrate, wasn't the triumphant victory I might have once imagined. It was just sad. It was pathetic and sad. But underneath the sadness was a profound, earth-shattering sense of relief. After all those years of crippling self-doubt, of wondering what was wrong with me, I finally had the absolute, undeniable truth. It was never my fault. I wasn't broken. I wasn't unwanted. I was a threat to a powerful man's web of lies. Conclusion. A new beginning. The aftermath was like a wildfire that clears away the dead undergrowth so new things can grow. Robert Jenkins resigned from the school board and every other board he sat on in disgrace. His reputation in ruins. Principal Thompson was fired. The teachers who had participated in the conspiracy were suspended pending termination. The Department of Justice forced the entire school district into a legally binding consent decree, which meant years of federal oversight, mandatory training, and massive system-wide reforms to their disciplinary policies. Sarah Jenkins transferred to a private school out of state. I never saw her again. At home, my family began the slow, delicate process of healing. Mom and Dad became Linda and Greg again, but now they were also Aunt Linda and Uncle Greg. It was confusing and complicated, but it was real. One evening, as we sat on the porch, Greg took my hand. "We protected you from the truth because we love you, Aisha," he whispered. His eyes full of a love so fierce it took my breath away. "But in our hearts, you will always be our daughter first and foremost. Always." And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my soul, that he was right. They had chosen me. Then they had saved me. They had chosen me twice. Healing wasn't instantaneous, but with the weight of the world's judgment finally lifted, I felt myself standing a little taller each day. The heavy cloak of being the mocked adopted girl was gone, replaced by the complicated, messy, but powerful truth of who I really was. Aisha Thompson, a daughter, a niece, a survivor. Agent Reyes became more than an investigator. She became a friend, a mentor, a living reminder of the strength I never knew I possessed. I made a choice not to let the pain define me. Instead, I turned it into my purpose. A year later, I stood on the stage in that same school auditorium, but this time it was on my terms. My voice was strong and clear as I shared my story, not for pity, but to give a voice to all the other kids hiding in the shadows, to let them know that they are not alone and they are not broken. I learned that the world can be an incredibly cruel and unjust place, but I also learned that one person's courage, when it is backed by the unwavering power of love and the unyielding demand for justice, can be enough to tear down the highest, most intimidating walls and let the light pour in. Thank you for listening to my story. Please subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, comment below, leave your like, and share this video with others.